Sean Dunn, thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Billy.
So you are the president and founder of Groundwire. And what's incredible to me about your ministry is that you are reaching young people at a time when every headline is telling us, every study is telling us that young people are moving away from faith. It's the most, anti-Christian generation. You'll hear these, I'm sure you know very well, all of these headlines, all of this research, and yet you reached, I believe, 116,000, mostly young people last year. You're aiming to hit 200,000 people with the gospel. And these are people who have accepted the gospel, right? This isn't just reaching out to those people. How do you guys do this? I mean, this is incredible to me.
Well, our specialty is really going after the ones that are walking past the church, driving past it. It's our audience. We're not going after the atheists. The media would want us to believe that everybody's an atheist, but truthfully, 71% of millennials and Gen Z believe that God's a real being and not just a concept, is the way that they say it in the surveys. However, they don't spend time with him. They don't pursue him. They're actually, in the Urban Dictionary, there's a phrase that really defines our audience. It's called apatheist. They believe in God, but they ignore him. And that's really our audience. And so what we're really good at doing is interrupting them on their entertainment, on their small screen, and bringing to light their need, their purpose, what's going on inside of them, getting behind their mask and saying, hey, something's not right. Have you ever thought about, the truth of the matter is they believe that God's real. We don't need to convince them that he's real. We need to remind them that he's relevant. And he becomes relevant when he intersects that point of need in their life.
Yeah, and I think you just spoke to the really intriguing element here, that you have a really distracted world. It's not just young people. Everyone is on their entertainment. They're on their devices. They're on social media. And it's very easy to essentially crowd God out of that, in terms of, I mean, just like you said, ignoring God, right? Not that you don't believe he exists, not that you don't believe he's there, but you kind of push him to the side to tweet and Facebook and Instagram and go through your feeds. And, we get incredibly, I think distracted. And so you guys meet them where they are, and talk about that a little bit more on the technology front. What are the specific things you do that sort of interrupt that process?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me talk about the messaging that works, and then I'll go there. So again, I think one of the things that we need to understand is these young people are not waking up with theological questions. And so if you address them from a theological perspective, I have a social experiment for you. Go out today, find 10 individuals that you do not know, and start the conversation this way. Would you like to have a theological discussion with me? And see how many of them stick around. However, if you walk up to the next 10 and you say, man, life's been hard, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's been a rough couple of years. How's that affected you? See how many of them stick around. That's really the messaging. It's the crisis that opens them up to a conversation about Christ. That's not where you leave it, but it's where you start. And so again, standing on a stage like I used to do and proclaiming God's real, believe in him, that's great, but most of them aren't taking the time for that. So the methodology that we use is really their social media platforms. They're spending over 10 hours a day staring at that screen. Everybody in the world has figured out the small device except the church. And I know that's a blanket statement, but pornographers have figured out how to steal innocence with that device. Politicians win elections with that device. Publicists tell us who we should think are important with that device. Product pushers get us to buy things we don't want and we can't afford with that device. But the church, for the most part, has said, put it down, come in, lock eyes with me. Well, when you understand that the average millennial, this is a round number, but it's a true number from a survey I read about 3 months ago, the average millennial Gen Zer, that they look at their phone over 100 times a day, that's an opportunity. It's not a problem. We can't get them to go to church, but we can't get them to put down their phone. So what we do is we use Hollywood-produced content. Another one of the statistics that is incredibly strange to me, but it works, is they say that a millennial has a 12-second attention span and a Gen Zer has an 8-second attention span. So you don't approach them with 90 minutes of content. Our content is 12-second, 30-second, and 15-second. And wow. The shorter it is, the better it performs. It's crazy. But you get their attention, you basically get behind their mask and you say, hey, come have a conversation with us. We're 24 hours a day. We have volunteers that are ready to engage with them, talk to them, and point them towards Christ.
That to me is very incredible and very interesting, that the shorter the content is, the better it performs. How do you go about creating this content and producing it? Because that's another part of this process. It's one thing to deliver content to people, but the messaging obviously is essential.
Yeah.
But what goes into actually creating that?
Yeah. So, well, we're taking another turn and pivot right now. We're adding to, but for the past several years, we have a producer friend in Hollywood who's a partner. And he does commercials for everybody else, but he really sits down and works with us on all of our platforms to design 30-second, 20 or 15 and 12-second commercials. But the new platform that we know we have to be on and be more effective at is TikTok. We have to be on TikTok. The problem is, when you're on Instagram, if you produce 2 new pieces of content every 2 months, you're good. You're golden. When you're on TikTok, if you're not producing daily, the algorithms ignore you. You're not a player to them. So we just hired somebody 2 days ago who, her job is to come in and produce content that gets people on the TikTok actually looking at the content and then inviting them into a conversation, praying the Holy Spirit touches that, anoints that, so that when somebody sees it, isn't just information, but it ignites something inside of them that draws them to a place where they want to go deeper.
Yeah, and that's so incredibly important, going deeper and reaching these people where they are, which is what you're doing in this innovative way. Now, how do you know, when you set a goal of, okay, we want to make sure we have 200,000 people this year come to Christ? How do you measure that? They see the content, then what happens?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is because the response is all through digital play. I mean, if it was a church, they could count heads. When it's digital, you literally can count heads. You know how many people see it, how many people click on it, how many people go to your website, how many people engage with your website all the way through the gospel presentation, how many actually chat with a coach, and then how many make a decision. It's the same thing as if you're counting hands in a church. You don't know what's going on in their heart, but you know if they raise their hand that basically they're saying, hey, I recognize that I need Jesus. So you can actually do that, and we look at it literally. It's one of those things that we have dashboards that update every hour that show us what's going on.
What's it like for you? You've been doing ministry for a long time, to know that your efforts through Groundwire are very literally bringing, this year, hundreds of thousands of people to Christ. What is it like for you, knowing that you're the person who is behind a team making that happen?
Yeah. It's incredibly humbling. It's really interesting, because I cut my teeth standing on stages, and I loved it, and I thought I was pretty special. And people were wanting me to sign things, and everybody was telling me, you changed my life, and you want to deflect. You want to say, no, it's God, but yet you grab hold of a little bit of that sometimes. Anyway, in the midst of that, it was kind of interesting, because I prayed that God would give me the ability to impact more people with the gospel than I ever thought possible, but that he would do it in a way that I couldn't take credit for it, and I didn't get noticed. At the time, looking back, I'm not even sure that, excuse me, as I prayed that prayer, I'm not even sure that I believed that I wanted that prayer to be answered, because I really liked the recognition.
You knew it was the right thing.
Yeah. But it was during COVID quarantine last year where God reminded me of that God reminded me that I had been praying, and I didn't pray it once. I prayed it multiple times, because I was trying to beat that pride back into submission. And so it is incredibly humbling. One of the young people that grew up in my youth ministry and was on my team for a while. I was with her and her husband a couple weeks ago, and I got the greatest compliment I think that I've ever gotten. She said, Sean, you are more humble now than you were when you weren't seeing the results that you were. The more God's grown the ministry, and it's incredibly humbling. I mean, one of the things as a preacher that a lot of people used to do is we would make fun of Moses, because Moses was the most humble man on the face of the earth, and we always thought, how can you say and declare you're humble? But I get it. I mean, I get it now more than I ever did, because you're humbled because you recognize this isn't happening because of us. It's happening in spite of us. Our job is to stay focused on him and to follow and say, God, I need you to give us wisdom every step, every day, whether we're creating new content, whether we're figuring out how to market, whatever those things are, we need your wisdom. And as we do, we can't take any of the credit because we're not smart enough to see these things come to pass. It's all about what God's doing.
So my final question for you, and this has been amazing hearing about the ministry and everything you're doing. You have a goal this year. You believe you're going to hit 200,000 people. Again, people who are accepting the gospel. Do you have a goal for 2022? Are you looking ahead to see what you might want to do next year?
We do. And I first of all, I got to tell you, it sounds crazy. But that's okay. So just to give you a little bit of scope, we've been growing significantly. We've grown from 17 people a day coming to Christ to yesterday we had 880 a day in 5 years. So I mean, the growth has been crazy, and so that kind of gives us a little foundation. But in January, I felt like the Lord began to challenge me. I wasn't thinking big enough, and I pushed back. I'm like, come on, God, we're already out over our skis. I mean, we're living this life. And for 4 or 5 months, I just felt that haunting thing that God was saying, hey, you're not thinking big enough. You need to begin to dream bigger. And so about May, maybe late April, I got to a place where I realized, I can't duplicate what God did this year. The plan's already too big for me. So why in the world wouldn't I let him dream bigger? So I said, okay, God, in obedience to you, I'll build a bigger plan. And so prayerfully, not just whimsically, but prayerfully, we began to put together a plan to see, again, this number sounds crazy, 1.2 million people come to faith in the U.S. next year.
Wow. And that's incredible.
As we laid it out before the Lord, we said, God, here are the steps here's what we have to double our coaching team in 14 months. We have to, our marketing, we have to continue to add new websites and messaging campaigns so that it's not the same ad coming after. So it's platforms, it's messaging campaigns, new URLs, all those things. So we began to lay these things out and say, God, okay, so we built it. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it'll cost. God, if you do it, we're excited to step into this. And as soon as we built it, God began to bring some people around us that were like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And so there's actually some movement on this that give me hope that we could see some very, very amazing things take place next year. It's not, the thing I want to make clear is it's not vending machine evangelism,
right?
But there's a predictability to it. It's
not just a number. You guys are, it's not. You guys are creating content that really is going to connect with people and create a lifelong, eternal connection.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we actually know what the cost per commitment is. And we know moving forward, we think as we scale, we know what it is. So, so the goal next year, and it makes no sense, but is 1.2 million. And I already have a verbal commitment for half of the resources to accomplish that.
That's incredible. Well, crazy. It's only $1 million more than you're doing this year. I mean, I don't know why.
It's only 600% growth.
Yeah. Well, how can people I said my last question was the final one, but this is my final question. How can people help if they want to get involved in some way, if they want to offer resources?
Yeah. Our greatest need is volunteers because our traffic is going through the roof, as you can imagine. And there are people out there who sit there and they say, hey, here's one of the things that it makes me so sad. People say, how is it possible I'm 27 years old and no one's ever told me God loves me? And we need to be there when that person reaches out. They most of the time they don't reach out and say, hey, how can God save me? They say, how can Jesus help me? But if you introduce them to God, we need you. We need that team to grow. And I'm telling you, it's one of the most fulfilling ministries you'll ever experience because you will see God use you to connect with somebody who is so desperate. And, if you would like to answer this question, just picture this. You're sitting in a Starbucks in a coffee shop and you're, product placement. They're one of my sponsors. So you're sitting in a coffee shop and somebody walked up to you and you were killing time. You weren't there for a reason. You weren't in a hurry. But somebody tapped you on the shoulder and they said, hey, does Jesus really care about me? If you'd like to answer that question, you would love this. And the typical coach gives us 2 to 4 hours a week. And it's on their time. It could be at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m, evening. It could be Saturday morning. You will never log in and wait more than 5 minutes before somebody wants to talk to you about Jesus. So if you're interested in that, or if you'd like to explore, but by the way, just two quick statistics. George Barna says that the average church in the U.S. sees one person a year come to Christ. Again, we're on track to see 200,000 this year. And another statistic is denominations will tell you it costs them over $35,000 to see one person come to Christ. This year will be under $18.
Wow.
And so it's just it's a crazy. If you're interested in learning more, I would encourage you. Probably the easiest website of ours to remember is jesuscares.com. And if you can check, and that's actually a forward facing one. So that's one of the websites that we would go reach Hannah, Joe, Julie with, that's out there. But you can trace it back, and you can learn about how to get involved in the coaching opportunity, or you can also consider being involved financially if the Lord leads you to do that.
Well, listen, I so appreciate your time today and taking us through this. What an incredible ministry. You're doing some amazing work, and I look forward to having you back again sometime soon.
Oh, thanks, man. Hey, I appreciate it. It's great to meet you.